Good morning and welcome everybody to the Hope One Show. Is your host Jorge Hill. Frank is still not around, and we want to thank you guys for praying for his dad. He's doing much better now. Hopefully Frank will be back next week, but for now I'm going to be hosting the show. Well, thank you for being here. Actually, let me bring this microphone here so you can hear me well. And we got Tim Barnett as our guest today. We have the great Tim Barnett from Stand to Reason. He's going to be talking about Gen Z, hope through the next generation. How can we reach them? Are they really living the faith? Are they really not interested in anything that has to do with Christianity or the church? How can we speak their language? So Tim is actually an expert in all of these things. He does a lot of research. He, like I said, works for Stand to Reason. He do a lot of great stuff for homeschooling and things like that. So this is the person to talk to. We're going to bring him in. But before we do that, just want to let you know that for the next couple of days, we're going to have Michael Jones of Inspiring Philosophy talking about is the Old Testament, did the Old Testament evolve from polytheism? And we also gonna have Lisa Fields of Jude 3 Project on Friday talking about a hope through a God that provides. So without further ado, we're gonna have Tim. Tim, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on the show. It's been a while since we had a chance to hang out, hasn't it?
I know, man. What it was? Well, ETS, we did a little bit in November and then the year before. But again, as we were talking before the show, man, you never accept my invitations to come to the Cross-Examining Structure Academy that is happening in Plano, Texas in August. So hopefully you accept my invitation to come this year, man.
Well, if they let us out of this self-isolation deal, this quarantine thing, then maybe I'll be there. Because
listen, man, join the resistance and come to CIA.
Just so people know, it's not that I don't want to go. It just so happens they keep picking dates where I'm already booked somewhere.
Listen, you are a guy who travels all over the States and internationally. Actually, you are in Canada right now. And I know I'm just joking, but I know you're always busy. But right now, remember, every year, and I will text Greg and I will tell him, look, don't get this guy booked the same week that you're going to be with us at the CIA. And it's usually the second weekend in August. It's usually the second weekend in August. So make sure you put a big fat X for the next 5 years in the calendar, okay?
It's on.
And we make it happen. So how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. You know, this whole Corona quarantine thing definitely has us all really busy. I thought that things would slow down because I wouldn't be traveling, but we're doing events like this, you know, hopping online, trying to be creative in that way. We're still trying to train Christians, right? That's what we do. That's our mission. And so we're finding new ways to do that. And I'm really excited because not only is today my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday, man. Hold on. Let me add this. Hold on. It's a sound effect. Tim Barnett birthday. Happy birthday, man. Feliz cumpleaños.
There you go. I really appreciate that. And so it's my birthday. But we also launched kind of a project that has been in the works for a few months. I came out with it back in the summer, just kind of as a fun thing. But then we, as Stand to Reason, wanted to roll it out as a more official.
I'm going to interrupt you. I remember the message you sent me say, hey, how can I write on images? I remember that. You said, what do you get to write on images? And I have no idea what you needed. And I said, well, what do you need it for? And then you lay it down for me. And I'm like, yo, that is a great idea. But go ahead, man.
So I remember that now. Good, you got a good memory. I'm trying to figure out exactly how I could do this idea where I have a teaching background. I was a full-time teacher for a number of years and left teaching to become a full-time apologist. But there's still, I mean, you can take the teacher out of the classroom, but you can't take the classroom out of the teacher, you know?
Amen.
And so I would read these tweets, these social media posts. And I, you know, immediately, because, you know, you and I have been kind of schooled in logic and philosophy, there's certain things that kind of jump off the page. And as a teacher, it's like, I just want to correct that. I want to get out the red pen And I want to just circle, here's the fallacy, you know, put the X here. You know, when I do that when I would mark papers. And so it ended up turning into this graphic, and then I posted it online, and people were sharing it
Moved.
and liking it.
I did see it move. I did see it move. It's like it was, and people weren't even sharing it. They were downloading it and posting it on their own profiles.
That's right.
I did see that.
That's right, and which is fine with me, you know. And so we just launched today Red Pen Logic with Mr. B, and so I'm Mr. B, I guess, and we put out a cool graphic, and not only are we doing a graphic, but we thought, you know what, let's do a training video that goes along with the graphic.
Yeah.
And so just like we were talking, I was joking about this with you. So a lot of our viewers would know who Bob Ross is. You know, he's got this big afro white guy who has these
by the way, if that's the look you're going for, I live near the Chinese wig store. I'll send you the most beautiful horse hair afro you can find. Okay, it'll be my birthday gift to Tim. So just marinate on that. Okay.
I'll think about it. So then you know, the idea is Bob Ross gets up and he's got his paints and his paintbrush, his easel, and he shows you how to paint this amazing scenery, and draws his happy clouds. So I'm thinking, you know what, this is kind of like what we're doing. We're taking a canvas here, which happens to be a tweet, and we're getting our red pen out, and we're just and I'm trying to walk you through exactly how to spot some of these logical fallacies and expose the errors. And so, and then when you see the red pen on the graphic, it's like, yeah, that's it. You get it, right? It wasn't so obvious at first, maybe, but once you see the teacher kind of go through it, it becomes easier. And our goal is that, man, everyone who's watching, who learns this approach, could pull out their own red pen, you know. Absolutely. And they'll be able to respond to these kinds of tweets and social media posts.
Absolutely. I love it, man. We actually going to show a little bit of that later on in the show, and we're going to challenge people to go to your YouTube channel and follow. But right now, let's talk about those who we want to influence with the red pen, and that is Gen Z. Who is the next generation, and what are they like, Tim?
Sure. So Gen Z, so people would be familiar with, say, the baby boomers, okay? That would be born 1944, around there, to 1964, that 20-year gap. Then you got Gen X, they show up, and you got 1965 to 1979, around there. And then millennials. And, you know, a lot of us are familiar with millennials, right? And so that's 1980 to about 1994. And then 95 onward to about 2015, that 20-year gap is what we call Gen Z, okay? Or some people call them iGen. This is the generation that would be in high school right now. Some of them are graduating high school. And so they are a unique generation. I'd imagine that if I asked, you know, our viewers, write down a bunch of characteristics about Gen Z, a lot of us, for whatever reason, have this kind of negative view of the next generation. I think that's pretty common. I think boomers thought that the Gen Xers, you know, they had negative view of them. The Gen Xers, likewise with the millennials. And so that's not really a surprise, but there is some unique characteristics about the Gen Z generation. And so some of those would be, I mean, the most obvious is they're digital natives, okay? They live online. In fact, a lot of them have to learn how to interact with people and be relationally offline. I remember when, it's my birthday, I'm 37 today. And
you're a young fella, man. Come on.
What?
You're a young fella, man. 37?
I thought you were younger than I am.
I am 38, man.
Oh, really?
38, yeah.
Yeah.
I just look 20 years older.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the hair throws people off sometimes.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Well, they kind of me. They say, you don't look old, you look wise.
Yeah. Well, that's sweet. That's sweet. So I mean, this is your world, right? This digital world, and so a lot of the next generation are online. Now, it's true that there are exceptions to this rule. Okay, so I'm speaking kind of in generalities. There are some kids that, in Gen Z that don't even own a smartphone. Okay, but the majority do. I mean, they grew up using it, and so they're not only digital natives, they're researchers. They're continually connected to the internet. They're able to find answers like that, and a lot of us have kind of learned to do that. When I need to I got to fix my washing machine. Okay, the door, something's wrong with it. I ordered a part on Amazon. I'm going to turn on a video on YouTube, and it's going to show me how to do it, right? And so you
Absolutely.
can find answers. They're researchers, and so this is interesting, because I think that's why the age of skepticism, which we're going to talk about in a little bit here, has actually lowered. We used to say kids are walking away from the faith when they get to university, and that's still true. But I think they're actually walking away even earlier. Okay.
Now.
So the age of skepticism, it has lowered. And I think that's primarily, and we're going to talk more about this, because these kids are exposed to people like Richard Dawkins before they go to university and hear a professor like Richard Dawkins. They can see him on YouTube, right? And this is where, they're researchers. If they have a question, they want to know about, hey, is God out there? They're probably going to Google it, okay? They're probably going to go to YouTube. They're not going to go to the youth pastor necessarily, or even their parents. There's so many other things. We could talk about them being impatient. Attention span is way shorter, and that's because of the world we live in. And they're not the only ones. I mean, my attention span has shrunk as well. I'm used to just quick. I remember dial-up. You'd turn on the internet, and then you'd go walk away and then come back
and wait. Yeah. And
do you remember those days?
Absolutely. You want to walk away because of the. Yeah, I remember those days. I remember rotary phones, bro.
Yeah.
I remember not only rotary phones. I remember phone booths with rotary phones in them.
Yeah. And so here's the thing. If we want to truly if we want to know someone deeply, then we need to understand where they're coming from. And that's why we're kind of going through. And that's why researchers have put together kind of these lists, right? And so impatient, fluid, they live in a different world than we did growing up, where their public life and the private life are kind of like meshed together because of social media. Work and home are going to be tied together. Look at most people now are working from home.
Bro, can I tell you something? My wife has an office right under mine. So we have a 2-story house. Her office is directly under mine, and they're almost identical. We have the same kind of desk. We have screens everywhere. And guess what? There is an extra desk in our office. For who? For our children. They're both homeschool. Yeah. So, my son sits with me here in my office, and my daughter sits with my wife in her office. So I completely get it, man.
Yeah. So, and then, and when I say fluid, then you get into the gender issue. And like facts versus feelings, those things get conflated together. This is a lonely generation. And there's a number of reasons for that. Of course, they're more connected than ever. Because of social media, we're connected with people around the world, right? When a friend moves away, they're still connected, right? Whereas when I had friends move away, we just lost contact completely. They were in a different school, different country, whatever. But yet they're still lonely because it's not a real connection. They have to put up kind of a front. When we look at Instagram, and we do this too, we'll take 20 pictures and post one, right?
Well, I don't do that because I take a picture and always come out good.
Okay,
maybe your problem.
You're a pro.
Yeah, I got the wrist on fleek.
You I think even have a selfie stick, don't you?
I got two. One for each hand. One is left-handed, one right-handed. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is, here's a quote actually from sociologist Jean Twenge. She wrote a book called iGen, really insightful book. But she says, iGeners or Gen Zers look so happy making goofy faces on Snapchat and smiling in their pictures on Instagram, but dig deeper and reality is not so comforting. Says iGen is on the verge of the most severe mental health crisis for young people in decades. So we need to be aware of just how screens and all this influences our young people. There are consequences for even, you know, being on social media. There's impact there. One of the things that's interesting for us as kind of Christian leaders or in ministry is that this generation is described as being post-Christian. Okay, and what the research shows is that Gen Zers are actually, they identify as an atheist at double the amount of the rest of the population. So whereas, you know, baby boomers and Gen Xers and millennials, about 5 to 7% of that generation would say, yes, I'm an atheist. You have something like 13 or 14% of Gen Zers who are willing to come out and say, no, I believe there is no God. So that's a big deal, right?
Wow. So they're disengaging.
Yeah.
How should parents and pastors respond, Tim?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, I mean, this is something we say at Standard Reason. This generation is the next generation is the most important generation of the church. And so, but there's a problem because they are walking away. There was a study done by Barnett. Actually, there was a whole book written around it called You Lost Me. And in the book, David Kinnaman, he says that students are disengaging, and that's the buzzword, okay? So you'll hear words like disengage or disconnect from the church. This is happening at 3 out of every 5 young people by the age of 15. So again, not university, but in high school, you know? Now, what are the reasons, right? Because if we're going to respond, we need to know why they're walking away. And there's 2 main reasons. One is intellectual reasons or barriers, and the other is relational barriers. Okay, so 2 things. There's they don't believe Christianity is true, okay? And then there's this whole relationship side, which we can talk about. Now, here's what there was a study done by Fuller Youth Institute, and her name's Carol Powell. She wrote this in the article. She says that according to their study, over 500 youth group graduates were asked these questions. Over 70% of church-going high schoolers report in having serious doubts about their faith. 70% serious doubts. It says, sadly, less than half of those young people actually shared their doubts with a friend or a pastor, okay? It said that they found that students who had the opportunity to share their doubts with somebody actually grew in their faith. So what they found was in other words, it's doubt that's toxic to faith, not it's silence that's toxic to faith, not just doubt in itself. And so doubt can be a good thing. Yeah. Christians can raise their doubts, and then when we provide answers, that can actually grow their faith. It's when a doubt is left kind of in hiding, in secret, and is never responded to, well, that begins to grow. And what ends up happening, I think, is what we're seeing, where you have 3 to 5 young people, or 3 in every 5 young people walking away from the church. And so, look, there's 2 kind of extremes. You could go with the alarmist. This is the only problem in the church. We got to, you know, or you could have the optimist view, which says, look, there isn't really a problem. Both of those are wrong. Okay, we're not alarmists. We're not optimists either, in the sense that it's not a problem. But we need to be able to respond. And so, our approach, and I know it's your approach too, at Cross Examine, is to bring truth and love together, okay? Or truth and relationship together. Both of those things are essential, okay? So for example, there was a study done, really interesting. They found that the most important factor in lasting faith was actually the relationship of a kid to their father.
Their dad, yeah. I've heard that, yeah.
Have you heard that?
Yeah.
And grandparents was like next on the list. Okay, so if there's grandparents watching. So this is a huge relationship is key. See, what ends up happening sometimes is apologists, we love to talk about arguments and truth. And that's like the drum that we beat on.
Right.
Okay. And people think, oh, well, you guys are just, that's all you care about. No,
Right.
it's a both and. It's truth in the context of relationship. In fact, students aren't likely to ask their question if they don't trust you, if you're not in a relationship with them, okay? They're likely to be skeptical of the answers you give. And that's why I tell parents, you can have them listen to my talks, that's fine. Or you can have them read, Frank Turek's book or whatever. But what you need to do is present this material. You need to talk to your kid one-on-one because you're the one that they're looking to for guidance. They don't know me from anybody. And so why would they trust me? Right.
They just look at you and they said, this is the Bob Ross of apologetics. That's about it.
That's right. I mean, we want to be the springboard into this area, but ultimately the primary apologist in your student's life is not Tim Barnett or Jorge or Frank Turek or Greg Kokel. It's you. You're the primary apologist.
Amen.
But that means you got to do some heavy lifting, right? That means you got to be the one that reads Stealing from God or Tactics.
Okay, so just using that, how can we build relationship? What are some strategies to help us build relationships? Because we need that, Tim.
Sure. Yeah. So here's some quick ones. I would say that this generation loves to communicate in story, and they love to share their own stories. And so what I would do is, this is not rocket science. Just sit down with your young person. Maybe you take them out for lunch or coffee or whatever, and you just share your story with them. Hey, did I ever tell you about the time? And then, go on from there. They need to see that you're a real person. Even if you're mom and dad, they need to see that you grew up, you were a kid once as well, right? You aren't this stranger, just authority figure, which you are, but you introduce them into what life was like when you were a kid. And so I would say, share your story. I would say, enter into their world. What do they like to do? They like to play video games. Play video games with them, and get the conversation going. Yeah. They're on, they like to play sports or whatever. Just get into it. Whatever they're into, try, make the effort. Be a good listener. So when you're now playing that video game, just listen. You don't have to necessarily be preaching at them all the time.
Right.
Find out and let them talk. Maybe you just sit in silence. I've talked to dads who they just didn't say anything and their kid just opened up, right? In that silence. And they were just able to listen and grow in their relationship. Here's two more. Take opportunity to mentor your young person. So say, did I ever, here's how I do this, or did I ever show you, this approach? I just wanted to, this is a skill that's come in handy for me. I want to share this with you. And I think those can be really meaningful times to spend and build relationship. And then, the last one, it kind of goes in with all of them, is just try to have good conversations with your young person. And look for those opportunities. Sometimes you're going to be asking questions. That's our approach, the tactical approach. Ask good questions. But look, your kid needs to know that you love them. Okay. The first and second, these are the greatest commandments, right? Is to love God and love your neighbor. It's interesting to me that the two main commandments are relationship commandments, right? It's like your relationship with God and your relationship with your neighbor. Those are number one.
Yes.
And number two. So that's the relationship piece. And I think we can do better as parents, as church. I know I'm talking to myself here, okay? Because there are counterfeit relationships that move in and can hijack, social media. There's a lot of counterfeit relationships going on there.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
Pornography, that destroys relationships.
Yeah.
And so people are looking for something and then they go to pornography. As a lot of young men do, entering that space. And I speak on this issue as well. And it's a counterfeit relationship. And what ends up happening is it destroys the person, their mind, their heart, all of these things, and ends up damaging the individual and future relationships. I've talked to men who are addicted to pornography, and it's destroying their relationship with their wife, for example.
Terrible, man.
And so we need to, here are some good things that we can do, practical things, and let's avoid those counterfeits.
Good stuff, man. Good
Cool.
stuff. So now we talk about worldview here and worldview there in the world of apologetics, but how does a worldview shape this iGen? How does worldview shape this new generation?
That's a great question. So we talked about relationship, right? And that's so key. And I want to make sure everyone heard me. I'm not saying it's just about truth. There's relationship, but then you have to bring in truth at some point. Okay. And this is where worldview comes in. Okay. We need to go to the worldview level here. In that book I referenced earlier called You Lost Me, David Kinnaman, president of Barnet, he says this. He says, I think the next generation's disconnection stems ultimately from a failure of the church to impart a comprehensive way of understanding reality and fully living in today's culture. So he's saying a comprehensive way of understanding reality, that's a worldview. Kids don't have a comprehensive worldview, Christian worldview. He goes on to say, our research shows that most young people have a huge lack or a deep lack in understanding their faith. Okay, so worldview, what is it? It's like your picture of reality, okay? And so we could think of it like a map. If I had a map of Italy, the country of Italy, you would know, most people would at least, if that was a good map or not, just by looking at like a Google Maps picture of Italy. It looks like a boot, right? Most people can pick out Italy because it's got this cool boot shape. But it would be a good map if the roads and the rivers and all on the map corresponded to real roads, right? And real rivers and real parks and all those other things. So there would be a correspondence there. And if the roads didn't match up, well, that would just get us lost, right? That would be a bad map. And so you can think of a worldview like that. Worldviews can be good and they can be bad. And if you have a bad worldview, like you have a bad map, it can get you lost and even hurt, okay? Because it turns out, and everybody knows this deep down, ideas have consequences. Okay? Ideas have consequences. And so if you were to think of it this way, what we believe will determine what we value, which will determine how we behave, which will determine who we become. Let me say it again. What we believe, that's our worldview, okay? That will determine what we value. And then once we value that thing, that's going to determine our actions, our behavior. And then our behavior, when you act something out over and over again, it changes who you are, okay? And so this is sometimes called, the head, heart, hands. The head's the worldview. The heart, that's what you value, what you think is valuable in the world, right and wrong, this kind of thing. And then finally, that determines how you behave, your hands, how you use your body in the world, okay? And so here we have two things. We're nurturing the heart, but we're also equipping the mind. And as someone who wants to reach the next generation, those are my two goals, okay? Nurture the heart, the heart, which is hard for me because I come into an event and I'm there for, a weekend.
A weekend, yeah.
This is where the parent, this is the person who's in the
Amen.
life of that individual, that student. That's where
Absolutely.
they can shine, right? But also we need to equip the mind. This is where I can help. This is where you help. This is where other apologists can help. And then, but still, it's the responsibility is on that parent to carry the ball, so to speak, and develop those two things. So truth and relationship, that's really the solution, I think, to pushing back against the rise of this exodus of young people leaving the church.
Great, man. Great. Now, you've given us a lot of information. I know a lot of our viewers are going to have to come back and rewatch these and take notes. One of the things that I've heard, I just did a talk based on some notes that our boy Brett Kunkel sent me. And one of the things that I said is the biggest threat to faith, at least from the perspective of a person who travels quite a bit in Latin America and is heavily involved in technology, is going to be, technology. Now, there's other great threat to faith, and that is, it's called apathyism, right? And I want you to tell me, what is that? Because, me and you grew up thinking it was going to be atheism. Now somebody's saying, hey, it's going to be technology. And now we have this new term called apathyism. What is it, and how can we defend ourselves against it?
Yeah. And I'm right there with you. I think technology is not, it's not neutral, and it has a way of shaping us. And, and so you're right about that. That's as apologists, we need to be responding to the challenges that are out there. And that means we have to change our approach, at times. And because to stay relevant, what are the current challenges of 2020? Because they're different than they were in 1980, right? Maybe the big challenge in 1980 was, is the deity of Christ or something. That was a big deal or something. But today, that might not be as big a deal as, say, something like technology or pornography or whatever. So apathyism, what is it? Well, apathy is this idea. Most people are familiar with apathy. It's when you lack interest, right? You're not passionate. You lack excitement about something.
Apathetic,
Yeah, you're apathetic. And so I don't know who came up with the term, okay? But however you say it, apathyism is the idea. So I'm just taking theism. I'm putting, instead of atheism, I'm saying it's apathyism. This is where a person believes questions about God, okay? They're irrelevant. They're not interested.
They're meh.
Yeah, meh. You can summarize apathyism in meh. Okay?
Yeah.
You feel apathetic towards God. And so you have theism, atheism, agnosticism. People are familiar with those terms. Theism, belief in God. It says God exists. Atheism, belief there is no God. Agnosticism says, well, you can't know, or maybe that person doesn't know. And then you have this new term, apathyism. And this is what we need to address, because there's lots of people, you can walk up to them and say, here's the Kalam cosmological argument, and you present it and they just say, meh, who cares?
Yeah.
Right? They have no interest.
Well, thank you. They're like, thank you. And then they're like that.
Yeah.
Go.
So this is where it's interesting, because apologetics, well, let me say it this way. It doesn't help for the apatheist on one level, okay? Because I want to give arguments for something or defend something, and they just don't care. They lack interest. No, I actually think there's a way the apologist can actually get the person interested. And that is, I think our ally with the apatheist is doubt. Okay. That's how you get people out of apathy. And so actually we can come back around to this later if you want, but we role play an atheist. And have you done this too?
I have not done it, but I got a couple of guys over in Latin America that are using that. And it's funny because you know, maybe we don't have time for that story, but how you played the atheist, and you've seen somebody else play the atheist, and sort of, you know, all those threads in the Grand Weaver's hand, it landed you
Yeah,
where you are now.
that,
But we talk about that
that's
later. But
right.
go, yeah, but go ahead and tell us a little bit about that.
So when I role play an atheist, sometimes I get invited into an event,
Mm-hmm.
and the kids usually don't know that I'm a Christian, and I
Mm-hmm.
get introduced as, this is my friend Tim. He used to be a Christian. He doesn't, and he's not a Christian anymore. Here, and he's going to present some reasons, just so you guys know. Here are the arguments on the other side, and then you can ask him questions. So
Mm-hmm.
I give a case, and I do a full PowerPoint. Like I try to be as persuasive
Next level, yeah,
as
yeah,
possible,
absolutely.
right? I want to make sure that my PowerPoint's tight. I want to make sure I'm friendly. I'm making jokes. Like, they can see I'm not this evil atheist, or
Right,
something. I'm a nice guy, because a
right.
lot of atheists are nice guys. And and then but when you end up seeing is this room full of, what we're told is, they're supposed to be apathetic, right? They're unmotivated. They
Mm-hmm.
lack interest. You better believe that when I'm done that role play, these kids are motivated. They are interested,
Mm,
because
yeah.
I put a seed of doubt. Now they're thinking, wait a second, all that stuff my parents believe, all that stuff we've been going to church and all that,
Right,
we've that was all for nothing. You
right.
mean there's no, so they've never heard these arguments before. It's like they're knocked. So the apatheist, well, as long as they're sitting, on the post, they're fine. I just want to come over and shove them. Okay.
Right.
And now they're moving. They're no longer apathetic.
Good.
They're interested in hearing apologetic arguments. So this is just something I've been thinking about. I don't even, maybe I'll write a book about it one day, because I think there's a need for this.
Mm-hmm.
How do you respond to apathyism? Not
Mm,
just, by the way, outside the church, but
mm-hmm.
inside the church.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because
Absolutely.
they're everywhere. And I used to be one of them, by the way. Okay, I
Wow.
was I was disinterested, growing up in the church. So but Jay Warner Wallace, if you're raising kids, and your kids are tweens or teens, young teens, here's an approach that is really helpful. And I think this fights back against apathyism as well. Jay Warner says, look, for every what you give, and maybe you've heard him say this, for every what, give two whys. Okay. For every what, give two whys. What he means by that is, if you're going to tell, this is what Christians believe, God created. Okay. You want to give two whys. And here are the two whys. Why should we believe this is true?
Mm,
And why should we care if it's true?
mm.
So the first has to do with apologetics. This is the evidence. Why should I believe that God created? Well, here's some evidence. Then you could give the
Mm-hmm.
you could give some science, some philosophy, whatever. But then the question comes, and this is to fight against apathyism. Why should anyone care if it's true? Okay, great. Because there's lots of stuff. Look, I used to be a teacher, and I taught about slope of a line, and we could find the y-intercept, and we could graph things. And you know what the kids would say? Why do I need to know this?
Right.
When am I ever going to need this?
Right.
I have a whole lot of apathetic students
Yeah, that
towards
was
math.
me. I mean, that was me in school. I'm like, I'm never gonna use this, man. I'm gonna be a famous rapper. I don't need all of this, man. You know?
Exactly. And we don't change that, right? We want to
Right.
know that what we're learning is relevant, that it is interesting. I'm going to need it. It's useful. This kind of thing. And so by adding that second why, you're addressing that question
That's great,
head
man.
on. Okay. And so the root of spiritual apathy is two things: Christianity isn't true, and Christianity doesn't matter. Those are the
Mm,
two things. So I want to show it's true, but not just that it's true. It actually matters for living in this world. It affects me as an individual. It affects
mm-hmm.
my family. It affects the broader community. This is really this is my goal. Okay,
Yeah.
and so I think we need to be doing a better job fighting against apathy. We write books about apologetics. That's great. but there's a whole group of people who are in that meh group,
Yeah,
right?
that meh category, and they're not being reached
That's
because we're
right.
using a different set of tools. I mean, it's good. The tools that we use are sharp for a certain type of screw,
Yeah.
right? But these other guys have a completely different gauge, and we have to figure out a tool to reach out.
Yep.
That's fantastic, Tim.
And Jorge, the number one question I get, by the way, from parents, Christian parents, is how do I get my kids interested? Because they some of them have read the books, you know, they know the answer, but the kids are just apathetic. So yeah, we need to, as a church, we need to be talking about this more.
Absolutely, man. This has been fantastic, man. I mean, I know you can continue to give us great tips and just, give us insights for hours to come, but
Sure.
we need to get to questions. Before
Yeah.
I get to questions, I want to play the premiere of the Red Pen Logic, okay, with Mr. B, and then I want to invite everybody to subscribe to your channel. So I'm gonna play this, guys. Pay attention. This guy is a master at this. Check this out.
Some atheists attempt at refuting Christianity, but only end up revealing they don't understand Christianity. Hi, I'm Tim Barnett, and today we're applying some red pen logic to a tweet from Atheist Republic. Class is in session. Atheist Republic offers 3 propositions to try to show there's a contradiction in the theistic worldview. First, everything has a creator. Second, God is that creator. And third, God does not have a creator. And then they pull out the red pen. I wonder where they got that idea. And they write, your solution fails when it violates its own premise. And they draw an arrow. Let's pull out our red pen and break this down. Atheist Republic gets off to a really bad start. The first premise is false. Game over. This concludes our time together. Just kidding. You see, no Christian apologist makes that first claim. We don't believe that everything has a creator. We believe that everything that begins to exist has a cause. That's a fundamental distinction, because if God did not begin to exist, then he doesn't need a cause or creator. Notice Atheist Republic's faulty argument is based on a complete misunderstanding of what Christians actually believe. The second premise is true with an important qualification. God is the creator of everything that begins to exist. The third premise is also true. We believe that God does not have a creator. Atheist Republic says that the solution fails when it violates its own premise. But that's not our premise, it's theirs. We don't believe the first premise. Therefore, the solution does not violate what we actually believe. This is a textbook example of a straw man fallacy. When you defeat a defenseless imitation of an argument, the scarecrow, instead of the real thing. In other words, it's easier to knock over a straw man than a real man. I find it really hard to believe that Atheist Republic did not know that we believe everything that begins to exist has a cause. It's literally the most popular argument that Christians use. Now let's summarize what we've learned. Christians do not believe that everything has a creator. If we did, God would also need a creator. We believe that everything that begins to exist, human beings, the universe, cool mugs, has a cause. So if God did not begin to exist, then he does not need a cause or creator. Atheist Republic is promulgating a straw man. Not cool, Atheist Republic, not cool. The red pen is not a toy. Think critically before you take the cap off. Class dismissed. If you want more clear thinking Christianity, be sure to subscribe to STR Video's YouTube channel, where we release training video each week.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That was fantastic, and he has way more videos to come. So right now, I invite you to get your phone like I'm doing and to tap that little YouTube icon that you love so much, and then go to the search bar and then search red pen logic with Mr. B, and boom, you need to go and tap that little red bubble and make sure that you do as Jorge Gill does and subscribe to that and turn on your notifications so you can get all the red letter videos. So that's it, guys. Make sure you go and do that, or if not, you know, Mr. B is going to be knocking at your door, you know, because you didn't do what we told you to do at the Hope One show. Well, Tim, that was fantastic. I hope everybody signs up for your YouTube channel. That was a great video, great editing, great content. Kudos to you, man. And now we're going to put Mr. B to the test. We're going to do Q&A. First question: what can college ministries do to best reach the students on their campuses? I'm leaning one here in Bloomington and one to hear Tim's take.
Sure. That's a great question. What I would do is, I mean, there's a number of different things. One is with your maybe a campus ministry. So maybe as a group, and there's a number of good campus ministries like Ratio Christi, and we call it Power to Change here in Canada, but I think it's called Crew. Get connected with a group there of like-minded believers, and maybe you know, here's one thing that I've seen: hand out surveys. And on the survey, you know, it's just the first, I mean, you barely get by the first question. It's like, do you believe in God? You know, these kind of spiritual surveys. And typically, man, university students love to talk about the deep questions. They're learning and studying these issues in their classes. And so to be able to share the information they're learning is something they enjoy to do. And so we've taken kids, high schoolers actually, to University of Berkeley, and of course Brett Kunkel, he does these trips. We were talking about Brett earlier, with Maven Truth Ministries. They go to Utah, and they start asking these questions with the students on campus. And what ends up happening is you get hour-long conversations with some of these students, and they get deep. And sometimes, you know, our approach at Stand to Reason is just to put a stone in their shoe. Okay. Not necessarily to get to the gospel every single time. And like, don't put that burden on your shoulders. Okay. And so in our conversation, we just talk about God's existence or the existence of truth or whatever it may be, that's fine. And we can, you know, continue that conversation later. So on campus, you may want to try something like a survey. You know, we were at one campus and they had a table with cookies on it. And it said, take a cookie, ask a question, or something like that. Or maybe it was answer a question. Take a cookie, answer a question. And they were asking those kinds of questions. What do you think happens when you die? You know, this kind of thing. And people have opinions. And oftentimes you just, you know, even if you hear the opinion, you don't know what to say, you just say, thanks. Thanks for offering it. You know, I've done that with my coworkers back in the day. You know, what do you think happens when you die? And they'd say, you know, I think I'm just gone. I'm in the ground. That's it. Okay, great. Thanks for sharing. And then just walk away. You better believe that person was hunting me down. Why did you ask me that question?
Yeah,
like, where did
absolutely.
that come from?
I like that. Yeah.
It's a conversation starter. And you kind of leave them hanging when you walk away.
They were like, okay, well, you know, warm food. Okay, great.
Yeah.
They walk away.
So that's one tool. But obviously there's some good campus ministries like Ratio Christi. And I don't know if that's at your particular campus. Invite an atheist to give a talk, or a Christian to come in and give a talk. You know, like, you know, you bring someone like Frank Turek in, there's going to be a crowd and it's going to get conversations started. Okay. And so, you know, Christians and non-Christians alike love hearing, their guy or maybe the opposing view. And so that might be another option.
I like that, man. Great stuff. Got Michelle Marie Rainier, if I'm not saying it wrong. Do you think, Tim, this apathyism is in some measure caused by technology and or an information overload?
That could very well be. I mean, I haven't seen any definitive study on that, but certainly there is a case where, man, if I have a question right now and go online, I can find answers in both directions, opposite responses. So if I ask Google if the Earth is, round or not, it'll take me to, like, there are sites online that will argue that the Earth is flat. Okay, and so when you have all this information, you begin to distrust everyone. We're living. I remember when fake news, like, that word didn't exist really. No one was using that, and now it's like our kids are growing up on the idea of fake news. And so if you believe that, man, I can't trust media, I can't trust the websites I'm on, I can't trust YouTube videos, then all of a sudden you begin to, you become so discouraged. It's like, well, who cares? You can't know anything anyways, and maybe that is there's a connection there to apathyism. That certainly seems plausible to me. But again, I don't know. I don't have any definitive research on that. What surprised me is there's just hasn't been enough research on this issue. That's why I said someone needs to write a book on it. And maybe that's me. I don't know.
Yeah. Make sure you don't write it all in red pen, because they're going to think you're trying to be like Jesus that wrote his stuff with red letters, man.
That's right. That's right. So I found a few papers that have been written by some theologians and then non-Christians sources as well, but they're, just talking about apathy in general, without that connection. So it's a good question though.
Yeah, and I got a follow-up question related to this one. It says, could apathyism be stemming from the massive number of self-worth and self-sufficient ministries and teachings that are so prevalent today? I mean, we know we're gonna leave them unnamed, right? Yeah. But there are a bunch of people right now that it's all motivational speakers, and they're just like, and they pass themselves for, ministries and evangelists and things like that. So do you think, that could be stemming from this high quantity of people doing these things?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, there's been those kind of motivational speakers and preachers, before I think the real rise of apathyism that's taken place in the last generation. But there definitely, there is an increase in that, because they're seeing, hey, that we can capitalize on this. Yeah. So there's probably a connection there, a correlation.
Yeah. Well, that's good. By the way, if you haven't seen He Who Must I Live Unnamed rapping, blowing the coronavirus away, you need to go to YouTube and find that video. I mean, you will have that song stuck in your head anyways. Getting back to the real stuff here, Jennifer asking at church, we're starting a YouTube channel for the youth.
Yeah. How
can we approach the youth, and how to make topics interesting to their ears?
Yeah. What I would do, Jennifer, is I would ask them what they're interested in hearing about. Oftentimes we think, hey, we just got to tell them what we think they need to hear. And that's true to a certain extent. But if you're in a youth group, why not go to them with a question, a box or something, and say, look, what are your top 3 challenges? What are you facing? And they don't necessarily have to be apologetic. Just what do you see as a challenge to Christianity or to your belief in God? You could ask God one question, what would that question be? And then you compile all those things. And what you're going to end up finding, I think, is that there's kind of certain categories. You're going to find there's a whole lot of questions about science and God, and those kinds of questions. And there's all this stuff about the Bible, can we trust it? Does it have contradictions? So you got all those things over here. And what you'll do is just week by week, let's take each one of these things on. And so if I was structuring a youth ministry and doing, YouTube teaching or whatever, I would want to make sure we covered apologetics. I'd want to make sure kind of three broad areas: apologetics, theology, which I think is a little bit is different. Apologetics defends the faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
Theology is the doctrines of what we believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you're going to want to have practical living, behavior stuff. So talk about things like sex before marriage. We tell people, I grew up hearing, you don't have sex before marriage. That was the what, okay?
Mm-hmm.
No one ever gave me two whys for it.
The two whys, yeah.
Yeah. No one told me where that is in the Bible, for one, where why should I believe that's true? And then no one told me why I should care if it's true. Mm-hmm. Okay. Those are two separate questions. So I would use that approach. If I had a youth ministry, I'd want to get my kids involved. And so this is just an idea, but if you're doing a YouTube thing, maybe have them submit, you give them a question and say, we want you to research this. Remember, the researchers, go look this up and put a video together. Maybe it's a 2-minute video and we're going to add it to our YouTube teaching. So here's, John and Mark or whoever, these two kids, and they got the question, who made God? And then they got 2 minutes to respond or something. And now you've kind of given them ownership. You've given them, and of course, these kids are so creative. Yeah. They know how to use technology better than any of us.
Love it, man. Yeah, it's pretty dope. Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's good stuff, man. I mean, you're full of good insights, man. And we're coming to the end of our show today, unfortunately. Now, I'm sure that everybody and their mom already subscribed to the YouTube channel. You probably will have 5,000 subscribers by the time you get off this live stream. But I mean, your insights have been great. I do want to answer Sam. Sam says, please be a famous rapper, Jorge. What he doesn't know is that I am a sound engineer by trade, and I was a producer for many years. I have lost my skill set for freestyling, but I might team up with Vocab Malone and do a little freestyling sometime. But you have to learn Spanish because I'll freestyle in Spanish.
Well, I want in on that. I want to freestyle a bit.
Absolutely, too. We'll do it. So we'll get David Wood to do the beat. And then we get Vocab Malone, me and you to do a cipher. By the way, Bobby Conway can do a little beatboxing as well. So we can get the 1 minute apologist to lay down the track for us. But now, just to finish this show is about hope. This show is called Hope One. We started this about a month ago to bring real information to lift people's spirits up during this coronavirus a pandemic and this shutdown. So give us a message. What can we do? That the show's title today is Hope Through the Next Generation. Yeah. How can we have hope through the next generation and during this difficult time, Tim?
That's a really good question and good point to leave on. You know what? When you look at the numbers and the studies that have been done on young people leaving the church, it can be overwhelming. 3 in 5 young people, and that's, I think, a conservative estimate. It could be higher than that, walk away from their faith by the age of 15. What I would want to say is that there is hope. I mean, there are real practical things that we can be doing. And we've talked about some of them, from just teaching truth and then living out the Christian worldview by loving our young people. And so truth and relationship, to me, that's this is a recipe for young people staying in the church. And so let's not be discouraged. Let's not throw our hands up. Let's do what we can to respond. And man, I know so many young people that have responded positively to what we've been talking about. And so let's go into this. Let's move forward with this, knowing that ultimately God's in control. And of course, we could have spent an hour talking about ways that we could be praying for our young people and trusting God to help us, one, disciple our young people, but also look after our young people. So I just want people to know that there is hope. We don't have to be discouraged. We can push back against this exodus.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you. That's a great note to leave on. And just thanks everybody that stayed throughout the whole show. Thanks everybody who shared the show. We are in Twitter. We are in 2 channels on Facebook. We're in YouTube. We are on our app. We are on our website. So we are everywhere. Make sure you tune in tomorrow, Lord willing, 11:30. We're going to have Michael Jones, and we're going to talk about if the Old Testament had polytheistic roots. And then on Friday, we're going to have Lisa Fields from Jude 3 Project talking about hope through a God that provides. Tim, again, thank you very much, man. I hope to have you again soon.
Thanks, man.
Bye-bye.
See ya.